If I told you that a single drop of blood could stop time, would you believe me? In the hills of northern Hungary, there lived a woman who believed exactly that. And she didn't stop at one drop, ... double quotes. They say there are places where the stones remember, where whispers of the past still echo between the cracks, and the wind hums not with breeze but with memory. Nestled in the far reaches of northern Hungary, there once stood such a place. Čachtice Castle. Ruins now, but if you listen closely, some say you can still hear the screams. She was groomed not just for courtship, but for command. The name carried legacy, and bore it like a flame in the dark. But as with all flames, there are things that gather to feed it. Shadows. A young maid who spilled a drop of wine on his sleeve during supper. What followed was not anger but a stillness. The kind of silence that makes the hairs on your arms rise. Ordered her taken to the lower chamber, what was once a wine cellar, but had recently been emptied. What they received instead was silence. Silence behind doors that wouldn't open. Silence filled with screams that never reached the ears of the world beyond the hill. Long ago, in the dying light of the 16th century, a woman walked these halls. He gifted her the towering castle in the Carpathians as a wedding gift. And in the candlelight, she thought it looked younger, fresher, tighter. The next morning, she summoned her most trusted chambermaid. And from that day forward, the baths in the castle were never dry again. But they all spoke of the same thing, that beneath the castle, something had begun. Something cold, something wet, something red. A gesture, they said, of devotion. A fortress of solitude. But perhaps it was something else. A cage, a laboratory, a stage, her name. But history would come to know her differently. Some called her the BloodCountess, others the Devil's Widow. That she was strange. She wandered the halls at night, fingers brushing the stone as though reading it. Sometimes she was seen walking the corridors in plain cloth, hands stained with something dark. She claimed it was ink, but ink does not run so thin, nor does it smell of iron. That she spoke to mirrors when no one was watching, and that the dogs refused to sleep near her room. A tale spun from fear or hatred or jealousy. Others say it is worse truth cloaked in myth to soften its edges. But one thing is certain. Something terrible once walked those halls, and it wore the face of a woman. No one dared say more, not then. And yet, in the beginning, she was merely a noble woman born of high blood, married well, and burdened by the unbearable weight of power left unchecked. That came later. In her youth, was known for her intelligence, fluent in Latin, Greek, and German before most girls her age could even read. At the age of 15, she was married off to Count Ferenc, a warrior of some renown, known as the Black Knight of Hungary. The servants whispered. Of course they did. But war has a way of leaving spaces behind. Count Ferenc left for battle. And in his absence, the castle changed. It started with one girl, just one. No one ever saw that girl again. What came next cannot be confirmed by parchment or seal. Only by the testimonies of broken souls many years later, old women with trembling hands and eyes that never looked straight. In the weeks that followed, more girls arrived. Farmers' daughters, servants from distant provinces, promised work, warm beds, perhaps even favor. And Erzsébet, she changed. No longer did she appear only in fine silks and noble gowns. And then came the story that no one could forget. That one night while striking a girl across the face in rage, a drop of blood had splashed onto S' skin. Some say it is all legend. What kind of silence must surround you? For hundreds of bodies to vanish without a single scream escaping? And worse, what kind of people must stand beside you, ... to make it possible? Rooms once filled with laughter and the clatter of footsteps now sat hollow, as though the walls had grown weary of echoing pain. Yet outside, in the surrounding villages, no one asked. No one knocked. The promise of coin kept mouths shut. And the fear did the rest. The castle grew quieter, not in sound but in presence. Water buckets were replaced with brass bowls. A copper tub was dragged down from the upper quarters. And set in the center, its rim etched with strange scratches that none would admit to carving. Some said they were symbols, others claw marks. They arrived with hopeful eyes and vanished without trace. A few ran. One jumped from a window before reaching the chamber. She broke both legs and crawled half a mile through snow before the cold silenced her forever. How her laughter returned. She hosted parties once more, invited nobles, jesters, musicians, but none saw the cellars. None smelled the iron that lingered behind the tapestries. Blood drawn not just from the body but from the breath. Began keeping a ledger, noting which girls gave her the lightest skin, which ones cooled too quickly, and which were unsuitable for spiritual work. And none questioned the missing girls because, in courtly circles, questions were the quickest path to ruin. Or perhaps too bold. Farmers' daughters vanished easily, but daughters of gentry came with names, with papers, with fathers who carried swords. Still believed herself untouchable. Some were made to eat pieces of themselves, told it was the only way to preserve their souls. Darvulia insisted it was holy work purifying the wicked, transferring life from waste to will. Who would accuse her? Who could? When they found her, her fingers were worn to the bone. Did not work alone. Dorota Shantis, known to locals as Dorka the Butcher. A heavy woman with hands like cracked wood. Then another. Then a night. The night never came back either. That was when rumors turned into suspicion. When missing became murdered. Ilona, the silent one, whose eyes never blinked when blood spilled. And Anna Darvulium, midwife healer, whisperer of old magic. She arrived last, and when she came, the true rituals began. She gathered them like shadows. Loyal women from the countryside. Older and forgotten, who had little to lose and everything to gain. The lower chamber was transformed. No one dared speak the real name, not even under breath. No longer a salarit became a sanctum. Iron chains now hung from stone arches. The girls kept coming, each with a name, a home, a mother waiting somewhere. Villagers whispered. Some claimed wolves had grown too bold, stealing daughters in the night. Others blamed plague or bandits. But inside the castle was thriving. Witnesses years later spoke of her skin, how it no longer aged with the years, how her cheeks stayed flushed even in deepest winter. There were candles burned in precise numbers, incantations muttered in Latin, corrupted by Slavic roots. The line between science and sorcery blurred, between need and addiction erased. And then came the noble girls. She had grown careless. One winter night, she invited the daughter of a lesser noble to dine with her. The girl never returned. Her father sent a letter. Inside the castle, the rituals grew crueler. Some girls were sewn together, then torn apart again to test the strength of the bond. And through it all, his hair grew darker, her skin brighter, her laugh sharper. She believed she had conquered time, but the walls were not deaf. The ground was not mute. Somewhere something had been listening. It was preparing to answer. Every secret bleeds. You can lock the doors, bribe the guards, and whisper your sins into stone. But blood has a voice, and eventually it screams. The first real crack came from within. One of the girls, a nobleman's niece, Fromm, did not die quickly, had chosen her for her skin, pale as morning frost, but something went wrong. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage. She bit Darvalia's hand, yet the name still protected her. And in Hungary, power was more sacred than virtue. He was slow to move. S family had long been allies of the crown, but pressure mounted. Nobles demanded justice. Some feared for their daughters. Others envied her land, her coin, her shadow. She carved her own name into the chamber wall with a shard of bone before the darkness took her. That name would be found years later, still visible. Still waiting. At court, whispers gained form. Unnatural deaths, they said. Missing bloodlines. A bishop dared murmur, she walks too young for her years. In the cellar, they found blood still warm, in the tub pieces. Some human, some unknown. And behind a false wall, a crude ledger. Page after page of names. Names, names. 650, but not forever. So she was not burned, nor hanged, nor drawn. A cautious man, cold as marble but precise, he had once dined with, laughed at her table. The stones she once loved became her jailers. What remains are fragments, burned letters, broken testimonies, and the shaking voices of men who swore they'd seen hell. When read the charges, she smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, simply ... amused. She asked if he had enjoyed the wine at their last banquet, then turned and walked back into the darkness. But he came now with a different face, stone-eyed and silent. He brought men, priests, soldiers, and a sealed order. If you walk its ruins under a moonless sky, you'll hear a voice, not screaming, laughing. Word finally reached the ears of King Matthias II. So the king sent a man, Georgi, High Palatine of Hungary, arrived unannounced. What they found that night has never been fully written. In the great hall, they found a girl barely alive chained to a pillar, her mouth sewn shut with horsehair, said nothing. When priests vomited and fled into the snow, did not resist. She stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in black, hands clean, eyes unreadable. She was arrested that night, but not truly condemned. The king feared scandal. The church feared questions. The nobles feared her still. Instead, they sealed her. They bricked her into her own chamber. One slit for food, one slit for air. No windows. No light, they say. She never screamed, not once. Only spoke to herself in whispers, reciting names, counting them, repeating. And then, one day, she stopped. No ceremony marked her death. No grave bears her name. Only the walls remember. But the girls, they remain. Some say their shadows still dance in the corridors of Čachtice Castle. Some say she died alone. Others say she never died at all. Because evil this old doesn't vanish, it lingers in blood. In stone, in us. The castle rotted with her. The villagers avoided its shadow as if it still breathed. Children were warned not to speak her name lest she answer. After his death, Čachtice stood abandoned for decades. Trees clawed at its walls. Snow broke its spine. No one dared enter, but legends have long legs. The 17th century passed, then the 18th, and still her name clung to the air like iron in the wind. Scholars dismissed her as myth. No proof, they said. No body count. The ledger vanished. The testimonies burned. They wear skin. They smile. They live in castles with wide halls and narrow graves. When he investigated, he found nothing except a circle of dried flowers arranged in perfect symmetry. He never returned to the site again. He painted her face the next morning. Months later, he hanged himself from the rafters with the words "Sanguis non mentiter" scratched into the wall. Blood does not lie. And slowly, Erzsébet became a story, a caution, monster tucked into bedtime whispers. But monsters, real monsters, do not need fangs or horns. At the top it reads 650. Beneath it, a blank line, space waiting. In 1725, a priest traveling near the ruins reported strange lights flickering through the cracked tower at dusk. In 1803, a German poet claimed to have seen her in a dream, as black as coal, whispering in a language he didn't know. Her skin, they said, had gone porcelain white, her blood too thin to clot. The guide claimed she lost 3 of them for nearly an hour. When found, the children were huddled in the cellar, whispering something over and over. And then, in 1902, a group of amateur historians excavated beneath the castle's collapsed west wing. They found bones stacked, sorted, small, and in the center, a copper basin, untarnished, cold to the touch. One of them, a woman named, took it home to Budapest. 3 weeks later, she drowned in her own bath. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the stories didn't stop. In the 1980s, Čachtice briefly reopened for tourism. A group of school children visited during a storm. She's not done yet. She's not done yet. Even now, visitors speak of strange sensations, cold hands brushing their shoulders, a woman's voice humming behind closed doors, footprints where no one has walked. And somewhere in an archive long since misplaced, a single page survives, a torn piece from a ledger. Because maybe the count never ended. Maybe Erzsébet was never just a woman. Maybe she was a question the world never wanted to answer. What happens when beauty, power, and death learn to speak the same language? And maybe, just maybe, that question still waits in blood. in silence, in you.